The whole damn state of Kansas was melting, and I was stuck in the middle of it, stewing in my own juices inside the rolling hotbox I called a cab. The asphalt ahead of me wasn't black anymore. It was a shimmering, silvery river of heat, wobbling like a funhouse mirror that stretched to an endless, hazy horizon. My rig, Big Bertha, my 40-ton home and office, was my only sanctuary, and even she was starting to feel like a sweat lodge on wheels. The air blasting from the vents had that familiar tang, hot plastic, stale coffee, the faint ghosts of 1,000 roadside burgers, and the underlying metallic hum of an air conditioner working itself to death. It was a valiant effort, but it was like trying to cool down hell with a single ice cube. On the radio, some gravel-voiced rocker was screaming his lungs out about a highway to somewhere unpleasant. Felt about right. Hell was probably just a few degrees hotter than this, and at least there you knew what you were in for. This was a special kind of purgatory, a slow-cooker torture designed by a god with a mean sense of humor. My back was killing me, a deep, grinding ache in my lower spine that was part of the job description, a souvenir from 2 million miles of bad roads and worse diner booths. 10 hours in this captain's chair and my ass had gone numb, but the ache was always there, a constant nagging reminder that I wasn't 20 anymore. Hell, I wasn't even 30 anymore. I was staring down the barrel of 40, and it was looking back with a mean squint. I shifted my 300-pound frame, and the worn leather seat let out a long, tortured groan that sounded exactly how my own joints felt. God, I was getting old. My knees creaked when I stood up. My hangovers lasted 2 days. I found myself grumbling at billboards, for Christ's sake. The other day I'd caught myself yelling at a picture of a smiling family eating yogurt. Yogurt? Who smiles like that eating yogurt? It's just milk that's gone bad on purpose. Case in point, a giant sign slid past my window advertising some Pop-Tart with hair the color of bubblegum and a name that sounded like a damn computer password. Lixie. What the hell is a Lixie? I snorted. A noise of pure, unadulterated disdain. Kids these days. What happened to real music? Guitars you could feel in your teeth and drums that kicked you in the chest. What happened to women who looked like women, not some kind of anime experiment gone wrong with lips inflated like pool toys? I took a long pull from my water bottle. It was lukewarm and tasted like plastic. Perfect. Just another cherry on top of this sun-baked shit sundae of a day. I tossed the bottle onto the passenger floor, where it joined a graveyard of its fallen brethren. My life was a series of disposable items. Cups, bottles, wrappers, and sometimes the women I met at truck stops for a single night of cheap whiskey and forgettable fun. I was neck-deep in a world-class, grumpy old bastard monologue, contemplating the existential despair of a lukewarm beverage, when I saw it. A mirage, maybe. My eyes were playing tricks on me from the heat and the endless monotony of the road. Up ahead, perched on the shoulder like a wounded canary, was a long yellow shape, a school bus, and it was in a bad way. Steam was billowing from under the hood, thick and white and angry, like the damn thing was trying to send smoke signals to a god who'd long since checked out. The front of the bus was nosed down into the ditch a little, looking sad and defeated. But it wasn't the busted bus that made my foot twitch on the accelerator. It wasn't the mechanical failure that made my pulse give a little kick. It was the confetti scattered around it, a whole goddamn flock of girls, bright little pops of color against the washed-out beige of the parched landscape. They were milling around on the dead grass of the shoulder, fanning themselves with their hands, looking like a pack of confused, miserable butterflies whose migration had gone horribly wrong. all wearing the same thing. Short skirts, tight tops, blue and white, little explosions of youth and energy wilting under the oppressive Kansas sun. Cheerleaders, a whole squad of 'em, wilting under the oppressive Kansas sun. Some were sitting on the parched ground, heads in their hands. A couple were leaning against the hot yellow metal of the bus, looking like they were about to melt right onto the asphalt. One girl was holding her phone up to the sky, turning in a slow circle, a desperate ritual to find a single bar of service. My boot eased off the gas, a purely instinctual reaction. Every trucker worth his salt knows rule number 1. You don't stop for nobody. The highway is a river, and you're a log. You just keep floating. It's a lonely road, but it's a safe one if you keep moving. You stop. You invite trouble. Trouble comes in all shapes and sizes. Con artists, thieves, cops with too much time on their hands. But every man with a functioning heartbeat knows rule number 1 has a few exceptions, a few fine print clauses, and a busload of stranded cheerleaders in the middle of a biblical heat wave. Yeah, that was sitting right there at the top of the exceptions list, highlighted in neon and circled in red ink. I let Big Bertha drift closer, the deep baritone hum of her engine dropping a few octaves into a predatory growl. As the scene came into focus, one of 'em broke from the herd. She had some sand, this one. I'll give her that. She'd been talking to a red-faced, sweating man who must have been the driver, gesticulating wildly. Then she seemed to make a decision. She planted a hand on her hip, squared her little shoulders, and started marching toward the highway with the kind of purpose that could part the Red Sea. Or in this case, stop a 40-ton semi in its tracks. She was a little thing, but she stood there on the edge of the asphalt like she owned it. A tiny general surveying the battlefield, a blonde ponytail, pulled so tight it looked like it was giving her a facelift, bounced with every determined step, big blue eyes squinting against the glare. As I got closer, I could see a light dusting of freckles across the bridge of her nose and a delicate sheen of sweat on her upper lip that just made her look thirsty and alive. So damn alive in the middle of all this heat-stroked misery. Her uniform was already damp, clinging to her shoulders and the small of her back. The white fabric was turning just a little translucent. I eased Big Bertha onto the shoulder, a move I could do in my sleep. The air brakes let out a long, satisfying shoo that kicked up a storm of dust and grit. It swirled around her, a mini tornado of Kansas dirt, but she didn't even blink. She didn't flinch, just stood her ground and walked right up to my passenger side door, craning her neck to look up, all the way up. My cab's a long way from the ground. It separates the men from the boys, and the truckers from the civilians who think driving is just a matter of pointing the car and pressing the pedal. She put a hand up to shield her eyes, looking straight up into the sun at my window, a tiny figure staring up at a metal giant. I leaned across the cab, the leather of my seat protesting again with a long, lewd squeak. My gut pressed against the steering wheel as I reached over and hit the button for the window. It whirred down with a tired mechanical sound, and a blast of my territory, my air conditioning, smelling of diesel, sweat, and well-done beef, washed over her. She closed her eyes for a split second and breathed it in deep, a little sigh of relief escaping her lips, like it was fresh mountain air instead of recycled truck funk. That little sigh did something to me. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated pleasure. "Got a problem, sweetheart?" I rumbled, my voice gravelly from the road dust and a pack of cigarettes I'd killed since sunrise. She planted her hands on her hips again. The simple movement did incredible things. It stretched the blue and white fabric of her top, which had wildcat stitched across her chest in big, bold, capital letters. My eyes might have gotten stuck there for a second, or 10. The fabric was pulled so tight I could make out the texture of it, the way it strained just a little over the generous curve of her chest. I could see the faint outline of what lay beneath, and my mouth went dry. The letters of the team name curved over her like they were custom-made for the landscape. "Our bus is dead," she said. Her voice wasn't whiny or panicked. It was clear, strong, and monumentally pissed off. Just stopped. Our driver, Mr. Henderson, is about to have a stroke. His face is the color of a plum, and we have the state championship game in Cedar Creek in 3 hours. I grunted, doing the mental math. I'd seen the last sign a few miles back. Cedar Creek's a good 50 miles up the road. "I know," she said, and for the first time, a flicker of vulnerability crossed her face. She bit her bottom lip, just for a second, but I saw it, and Lord have mercy, it was a hell of a look, fuller than you'd expect, and a shade of pink that didn't come from a tube. It was a nervous habit, maybe, but on her, it looked like an invitation. I was hoping, I know it's a long shot, and my coach would kill me, but I was hoping you could give me a ride into town. Just me. I'm the team captain. If I can get to a garage, I can get a mechanic and a tow truck sent back for everyone else. I glanced past her, at the rest of the squad wilting in the heat, like flowers in a drought. A few of them were looking over, their faces a mixture of hope and desperation. They looked like kids, scared kids. Then my eyes came back to her. The captain. Of course she was. She had that hum of command about her, that crackle of energy that said she was the one who got shit done. She wasn't just asking for a ride. She was executing a rescue mission. She was saving her team. And damn it all to hell, I've always been a sucker for a woman on a mission, especially one who looked like her, all flushed and sweaty and determined. The sweat had plastered a few stray blonde hairs to her temple, and it only made her look more real, more potent. "All right, kid, hop in," I said, my voice gruffer than I intended. I made a big show of leaning over and sweeping a pile of crumpled maps, greasy burger wrappers, and logbook pages off the passenger seat and onto the floor. It was a gesture of chivalry, trucker style. The junk landed with a soft, disappointing thud. "But I ain't got all day. Clock's ticking." A smile exploded across her face. It was like someone flipped a switch and lit up the whole damn highway, a supernova of pure, unadulterated relief. "Oh my God, seriously? Thank you. You are an actual, literal lifesaver." She practically skipped to the door. I watched in my big convex passenger side mirror as she reached up and grabbed the handle. Now here's the thing about getting into a rig like Bertha. It's a climb. It's an athletic event. 3 steep metal steps, a good 7 feet from ground to cab floor. Doing it in jeans is one thing. Doing it in a short, pleated cheerleader skirt, that's a whole other level of performance art. And I had a front row, panoramic seat. She put one small, bright white sneaker on the first step. The rubber sole squeaked against the hot metal. The step was caked in dried mud and God knows what else. But her shoe was pristine. Then she hoisted herself up for one glorious, sun-drenched, slow-motion moment. My mirror was filled with the sight of a long, tanned leg. All smooth skin and tight, that athletic muscle. The skirt, God bless its optimistic little heart, tried to maintain some level of decorum. It failed, spectacularly. It fluttered up, revealing a pair of tiny dark blue spandex shorts underneath, the kind they call spankies. They were stretched tight over a firm, round backside, and the powerful sculpted curve where her thigh met her hip was a masterpiece of biology. She paused on the second step, her calf muscle flexing into a perfect teardrop shape. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel. She grabbed the handle inside the doorframe and pulled herself up to the final step, the skirt fluttering up even higher, giving me a breathtaking, heart-stopping view that was going to be burned into my retinas for the rest of my damn life. She swung herself into the cab with a little grunt of effort, landing in the passenger seat with a soft whoomp of flesh on leather. And just like that, my world got small. My cab, which usually felt like a damn concert hall on wheels, a kingdom I ruled from my leather throne, suddenly had the dimensions of a phone booth. She was right there. Her bare knees were inches from my right hand, which was resting on the gear shift. She had a pair of enormous fluffy pom-poms, one pink and one white, clutched in her hand. She tossed them onto the massive dashboard, where they bounced silently against the windshield like two weird, fuzzy creatures from another planet. Then came the smell. Jesus, the smell. My cab has a signature scent. It's a carefully cultivated aroma of man. Diesel fumes, honest sweat, worn leather, and the lingering holy ghost of 10,000 bacon cheeseburgers. It's my smell. It's the smell of my life. But she brought a whole new weather system in with her. It was something sweet and sharp and clean. Strawberries, maybe, and some kind of floral thing, like a garden after it rains, mixed with the clean, almost electric scent of a girl's skin in the heat. It wasn't just perfume. It was her. It crashed into my gritty, grassy reality and created something intoxicating, dangerous. It was a smell that made you forget your own name. It filled every corner of the cab, erasing my own scent, claiming the territory as her own. "I'm Brittany, by the way," she said, her voice a little breathless from the climb. She reached for the seatbelt and pulled it across her chest. The thick black strap settled into a very, very strategic valley, bisecting the Wildcats logo right between the L and the D. I tried not to stare. I'm a professional, after all, but I'm also a man who's been staring at nothing but white lines for 10 hours. I failed, miserably. My eyes traced the path of the belt, down over the curve of her stomach, and across her lap. "Sam," I grunted back, forcing my eyes forward, focusing on the heat haze rising from Bertha's hood. I shoved the rig into gear. The stick was a cold, hard piece of steel in my hand, a familiar anchor in a suddenly unfamiliar world. I checked my mirrors, gave the air horn a quick, loud blast, a signal to her team that their captain was secure and on her way, and eased Big Bertha back onto the blacktop. The cab fell quiet for a minute. The only sounds were the deep, steady hum of the Cummins engine and the high-pitched whine of the tires spinning on the hot pavement. But the silence was loud. It was thick with her presence. I could feel her next to me. It wasn't just seeing her. It was a physical presence, a radiating field of heat and energy that was messing with my own. The sun was beating down, sure, but the temperature inside the cab had just gone up by 20 degrees, and it had nothing to do with the weather. I could feel the warmth coming off her bare legs. "So you're the captain, huh?" I said, just to break the spell, just to think about something, anything, other than the fact that her skirt ended at a point on her thighs that was making my palms sweat against the wheel. "Yep, 3rd year in a row," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice without even looking. Her energy was relentless, a bright, bubbly thing that bounced off the walls of the cab. It's a lot of pressure, you know, especially with the championship on the line tonight. We have this brand new routine we've been working on for months. It's super complicated. A real killer. I nodded, keeping my eyes glued to the endless white lines of the highway. Yeah, I bet. I wouldn't know. The most complicated routine I had to master was backing this beast into a tight loading dock without taking out a wall. Lots of, jumping and whatnot. Oh, way more than that, she said, and I risked a glance over. Her hands were starting to move, little sharp gestures in the air, as if she was already running through the counts in her head. It's the finale, she went on, her voice getting more animated. It's got this crazy, difficult lift and a synchronized pike jump that has to be perfect. If we nail it, we'll win for sure. But if we mess it up... She trailed off, shaking her head, the motion making her ponytail whip back and forth. I'm just so worried I'm going to forget something. Being stuck on the side of that road for an hour has totally thrown off my focus. My whole pregame rhythm is shot. I looked over again. She was chewing on her thumbnail now, her bright blue eyes clouded with genuine, honest-to-God worry. It was kinda... cute. The fierce captain who'd faced down a semi-truck was also a girl who was scared of messing up a dance routine. It made her seem more real. It was a crack in the perfect, confident armor, and it was ridiculously endearing. You'll be fine, kid. You look like you got your shit together. I know, but practice is everything, she insisted. Muscle memory. You have to drill it until you can do it in your sleep. She looked around the cab, her eyes scanning the tight space between us. The dashboard littered with my life's debris, the low ceiling. A slow, mischievous grin started to spread across her face. It was a completely different smile from the one she'd given me before. This one was trouble. This one had ideas. You know, there's probably enough room in here to at least run through the arm movements, just to keep it fresh. I let out a short, sharp laugh. A bark, really. The sound surprised me. Be my guest. Just try not to knock my coffee over. It's a delicate ecosystem in here. Deal, she chirped, her good mood instantly restored by the prospect of action. Then she unbuckled her seatbelt. The loud click echoed in the small space like a gunshot. My head snapped toward her. Gotta stretch first, she announced, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Can't risk pulling a muscle before the big game. Before my brain could fully process the implications of that statement, she turned in her seat. She braced one hand on the dashboard for support, the tips of her fingers pressing into the sun-softened plastic, and with the fluid grace of a born athlete, she lifted her right leg, straight up, high up. She propped her little white sneaker right up there on the dash, nestled between the speedometer and her fluffy pink pom-pom. My breath hitched. I think I might have swallowed my tongue. My heart did a little flip-flop in my chest, a clumsy acrobatic maneuver of its own. Her leg was stretched out straight, a perfect, toned, golden-brown line of pure biology, just inches from my face. The inseam of those little blue spandex shorts, the ones she wore under the skirt for modesty, was on full, glorious display. The pleats of her skirt fell away, revealing the kind of athletic thigh that could crack a walnut, or a trucker's 40 years of hard-won composure. I could see the definition of her quad muscle, the slight indentation where it met her knee, the flawless, sun-kissed skin. I could see the tiny pale blonde hairs on her thigh, catching the sunlight. The truck swerved, just a little. A quick, violent jerk to the right. My hands, which had been loose on the wheel, clamped down hard. My knuckles went white. Whoa there, big guy. She giggled, completely oblivious. Or maybe not. Maybe she was a goddamn master of feigned innocence. Keep it between the lines. Pothole, I lied, my voice coming out as a strangled croak. My throat felt like it was full of sand. Damn roads out here, full of 'em. Okay, so the stretch feels good, she said, more to herself than to me. She was in her zone. Then she leaned forward, her back curving gracefully as she reached for her toes. The movement brought her upper body closer, the sweet strawberry scent of her perfume flooding my nostrils, thick and heavy and suffocating. The V-neck of her uniform dipped, and for a split second, I had a perfect view of the shadowed valley between her breasts. I could feel the heat radiating off her skin. The cab wasn't 100 degrees anymore. It was a furnace, a blast furnace. She held that stretch for what felt like a week, an eternity. Her body was a taut line of pure, concentrated temptation. I was trying to focus on the highway, on the 18-wheeler I was supposed to be passing, on not killing us both in a spectacular fireball. But my peripheral vision was completely hijacked. It was all her. The flawless line of her leg, the delicate curve of her back under her uniform, the way her blonde ponytail swayed with the truck's constant vibration, brushing against the sun visor. Finally, mercifully, she brought her leg down. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. It came out shaky and loud. "Okay, much better," she announced, turning to face forward again as if nothing had happened. "Now for the routine." She started moving her arms, sharp slicing motions that cut through the thick air in the cab. 5, 6, 7, 8, high V, low V, daggers. Her hands were a blur of motion, a flurry of controlled energy. They came within a hair's breadth of my cheek, and I flinched like a rookie who'd just heard an air brake for the first time. The wind from her sharp movements was a physical thing, carrying her scent directly to me. She laughed, a bright tinkling sound that was completely at odds with my current state of cardiac arrest. "Don't worry, I'm a professional," she winked. "Total control." She was completely lost in her own world, humming the frantic beat of some cheer music under her breath, her body twisting and turning in the impossibly small space of the passenger seat. Her shoulder brushed against my arm. It was a fleeting, feather-light touch, but it sent a jolt of pure, high-voltage electricity straight through my system. My skin tingled where she'd made contact, the spot suddenly feeling 10 degrees hotter than the rest of me. My whole arm felt like it had fallen asleep and was waking up with pins and needles. "And this is the hard part," she said, her brow furrowed in concentration. "It's a barrel roll into a clap and spin. The transition is killer. You have to keep your core super, super tight." To demonstrate, she twisted her torso sharply to the left. This time, it wasn't a brush. Her side pressed firmly against my bicep. It lingered. I could feel the solidness of her ribs through the thin fabric of her uniform, the warmth of her skin seeping through my shirt. I didn't move my arm. I didn't breathe. I just drove, my arm a statue of stone and tingling nerves, my knuckles white on the wheel. She held the pose, her body pressed against mine, humming the count to herself. The deep vibration of the engine seemed to be running right through both of us now, a resonant bass note that connected us in the tight space. It was a physical link, a shared shudder that started in the tires on the asphalt and ended somewhere deep in my gut. The sun beat down on the massive windshield, and the air grew thick and heavy, saturated with her scent and the unspoken thing that was happening between us. I could see a fine sheen of sweat glistening on her collarbone, catching the light like tiny diamonds. "See, it's tricky," she said, her voice a little breathless from the effort. She turned her head and looked at me, her blue eyes sparkling with a mixture of exertion and something else. Something knowing, a challenge. "You're not a very talkative guy, are you, Sam?" "Just focused on the road," I managed to rasp, my throat as dry as the Kansas dust. It was a half-truth. I was focused on the road, but only because the alternative was focusing entirely on her, and I was pretty sure that would lead to a multi-car pile-up. "Right, the road," she said, and a tiny, sly smile played on her lips. She knew. Of course she knew. She knew exactly what she was doing to me. This wasn't just practice anymore. This was a full-blown performance, and I was the sold-out, front-row, captive audience. She leaned back in her seat, fanning her flushed face with her hand. "Whew, it's hot in here. I can crank the AC," I offered, my hand inching toward the dial. It was a desperate move, a plea for a blast of cold air to clear my head. "No, it's fine," she said, a little too quickly. "I like the heat. Gets you warmed up properly, prevents injuries." She said it with a straight face, but her eyes were dancing. She took a deep, deliberate breath, her chest rising and falling in a way that drew my eyes against my will, and then she looked at me. Her expression turned serious again, the playful glint in her eyes replaced by that captain-like focus. "Okay, the finale, the big one, the Wildcat Pike. I really need to get the feel for this lift." "Another stretch?" I asked, my voice a pathetic mix of hope and terror. "No," she said, shaking her head slowly, her ponytail swishing. "It's the lift itself. It's where my flyer, Jessica, she's tiny, launches off my base." I was a trucker. I knew about wheel bases, not cheerleading bases. "Your base?" "Yeah," she said, and then her eyes started a slow, deliberate tour of me. It was an appraisal, a damn inspection. It started at my worn-out steel-toed boots, traveled up the faded denim of my jeans, lingered on my thick arms and the hands gripping the wheel, and finally came to rest on my broad chest and shoulders. It felt like she was measuring me. The person at the bottom, the foundation, they have to be really strong, solid as a rock. She paused, her blue eyes locking with mine, holding my gaze captive. "Like you," I swallowed. It felt like I was swallowing a golf ball. A hot, spiky golf ball. "I'm driving an 80,000-pound missile down the highway, kid. I know. But I don't need you to lift me, not for real," she explained, leaning forward a little, her voice dropping to a low, conspiratorial whisper that was for me and me alone. It cut through the engine noise and wrapped around me like smoke. I need to feel the positioning, the balance point. It's all about core stability and finding the center of gravity." She bit that lip again, that goddamn lip. It was my kryptonite. I need a base to practice on. My brain went offline, a blue screen of death. All systems crashed. She couldn't possibly mean what I thought she meant. Not in a moving truck, not on my lap. The idea was so insane, so fantastically reckless, it didn't seem real. She wanted to sit on my lap while I was driving. That was the long and short of it. The practice was just a flimsy, see-through excuse. "It would just be for a second," she pleaded, her eyes wide and sincere, a master class in persuasion. "I'll be quick. I just need to sit, feel the balance for the push-off, and get the alignment right in my head. Please, Sam, it's for the championship." The championship. Right. We were doing this for the Wildcats, for glory, for a big, shiny trophy. That's what this was about. I was a patriot, a patron of the athletic arts. That was the story I was telling myself anyway. It was a bullshit story, but it was the only one I had. I should have said no. Any sane, rational man would have slammed on the brakes, kicked her out, and told her to find a different damn base on the side of the road. It was dangerous. It was insane. It was the single stupidest, most reckless idea I had ever heard in my entire life. My job, my license, our lives, all on the line for a cheap thrill. "All right," I heard a voice say. It sounded like mine, but it felt like it came from someone else, someone much, much dumber, someone who had just traded his common sense for a pair of big blue eyes. But if we end up in a ditch full of corn, it's on you. Her face lit up with that million-watt, city-powering smile again. You're the best. And then it happened. It happened so fast I didn't have time to second-guess it, to retract my monumentally stupid offer. She wasn't a girl anymore. She was a blur of blonde hair and blue fabric, a whirlwind of kinetic energy. In one fluid, seamless motion, she pushed off her seat, swung her long legs over the center console with an athlete's practiced grace, clearing the gear shift and my collection of empty coffee cups, and suddenly she was in my space, my zone, my territory. She twisted in midair, a maneuver that defied both physics and the cramped confines of the cab, her back to the windshield, and before I could form a single coherent word of protest, she lowered herself onto my lap, my entire world tilted on its axis. The road, the sky, the horizon, everything just shifted. She was facing me. Her legs were wrapped around my waist, her little white sneakers hooked behind my back, locking her in place. My hands were still frozen on the steering wheel, a death grip on the worn leather. Her hands came up to rest on my shoulders, her fingers gripping me for balance, her palms warm against my shirt. We were face to face, so close I could see the tiny flecks of gold floating in the blue of her eyes. So close I could feel her breath, warm and sweet and smelling of strawberries, ghosting across my cheek with every exhale. So close I could feel the frantic hummingbird beat of her heart against my chest. Or maybe it was mine. I couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. They were hammering in a panicked, unsynchronized rhythm. The sheer raw reality of the situation was staggering. This tiny powerhouse of a cheerleader was sitting on the lap of a 300-pound trucker, her body locked to his as he piloted a semi-truck down a major American highway. Her short skirt was bunched up around her hips, a useless decoration at this point. The rough, thick denim of my jeans was a stark, abrasive contrast to the impossible smoothness of her bare thighs wrapped around me. The top of the steering wheel was pressed firmly against her lower back. The gear shift, cold and hard, was jammed awkwardly against her left hip, a metallic intrusion into this sudden, shocking intimacy. "Okay," she whispered, her voice husky and low. "This is perfect. You're really solid. Trying to keep an 80,000-pound vehicle on the road," I croaked out. My eyes were darting manically between her face and the white lines of the highway rushing toward us under the wheels. My brain was screaming at me. Danger, danger, abort. Right. Driving, she breathed, as if remembering a minor, insignificant detail. "Okay, so for the lift, I have to engage my core." She tensed, and I felt the muscles in her stomach clench into a hard wall against me and push up with my hands. Her fingers tightened on my shoulders, her nails digging in just a little, marking her territory. And the base just has to hold steady, rock solid. Her eyes were locked on mine. The thin, flimsy pretense of practice was evaporating, melting away under the blistering heat that was building between us. The cab was an oven. The air was thick, heavy, and charged, tasting of her perfume and our shared breath. "So, I push up, on the count of 3. She murmured, her voice barely audible over the engine's deep-throated roar. But she didn't count. Instead, she moved. She shifted her weight. Just a small, exploratory movement. A slight rocking motion, a subtle adjustment of her hips against mine that sent a seismic shockwave straight through my groin and up my spine. It wasn't a cheerleading move. It was something else, something ancient and primal and absolutely not meant for public highways. Gotta get the balance right, she breathed, her eyes fluttering shut for a second. She pressed herself against me, a slow, deliberate, circular grind. My hands clenched on the steering wheel until my knuckles ached. The truck drifted to the right, just enough for the tires to catch the edge of the shoulder, the rumble strip. But the whole cab shuddered violently. She gasped, her eyes flying open, wide and startled. Her body jolted against mine. A shock, pure and electric, passed between us, amplified by the vibration of the road. Pothole, I grunted, yanking the wheel to correct our course. It was the most pathetic lie I'd ever told. We both knew exactly what that was. A jolt of a different kind, a slow, wicked, knowing smile spread across her face. Right, a pothole. And then the practice got serious. She started to move with a purpose, a steady, insistent rhythm, pushing up with her hands on my shoulders and using her powerful legs to rock her hips against me. It was a slow, torturous, beautiful dance, perfectly synchronized with the deep, thrumming vibration of the diesel engine beneath us. The whole cab started to feel like it was moving with us, swaying to our rhythm, a willing participant. The suspension groaned under the shifting, rhythmic weight. Big Bertha was an old girl, but she'd never had a workout like this. She was used to hauling 50,000 pounds of lumber or steel, not hosting, whatever the hell this was. I imagined a four-wheeler passing us, the driver catching a glimpse of the cab, rocking back and forth, and thinking I was having some kind of fit. Is this helping with the routine? I managed to get out, my voice a strangled, pathetic rasp. I was trying to maintain the fiction, clinging to it like a life raft. She hummed, leaning forward and resting her forehead against mine. Her hair smelled like sunshine and strawberries. I could feel the sweat beating on her temples, could feel the heat of her skin against my own. So much. You're a really good bass, Sam. Her movements became more urgent. The gentle rocking became a steady, powerful, driving rhythm. She was in control, the captain, leading a very, very different kind of routine. My only job was to hold steady, to be her foundation, and to not drive us into a goddamn cornfield. It was the most intense, high-stakes multitasking of my entire life. My foot was a rock on the accelerator. My hands were locked on the wheel, but every other nerve ending, every other part of me, was completely and utterly consumed by her. The feeling of her weight on my lap, the maddening friction of her body moving against mine, the sound of her breathy little gasps right next to my ear, mixing with the roar of the engine. The windows were starting to fog up. A misty haze was creeping in from the edges of the glass, blurring the outside world into an impressionist painting of green and blue. Inside our little bubble, our steamy, vibrating world, it was just the two of us, the roar of the engine, and the rhythmic, desperate groaning of the cab's suspension. She was working now, really working, her whole body committed to the movement. Her face was buried in my neck, her little whimpers and gasps muffled against my skin. "Almost there," she whispered, her voice tight and strained, her breath hot against my neck. The big finale. She picked up the pace, her body moving with a frantic, desperate energy that was all raw passion and zero choreography. The truck was rocking now, a definite, undeniable, side-to-side sway that had nothing to do with the road and everything to do with the cheerleader on my lap. It felt like we were on a boat in a hurricane, tossed back and forth by a force of nature. A tiny, blonde, cheerleader-shaped force of nature. My breath was coming in ragged, painful pants. The whole world had narrowed down to the space between my hands on the wheel and the girl in my lap. The road, the sky, the other cars. It was all just a meaningless blur seen through a thickening curtain of steam. She was clinging to me, her body a coiled spring of tension, her hips driving against me with a single-minded purpose that was both terrifying and unbelievably hot. Then, with a final, sharp gasp that was swallowed by the roar of the engine, her whole body went rigid. Her fingers dug into my shoulders like claws, her head fell back, and a violent shudder ran through her entire frame. She collapsed against me, her body going boneless and limp, her forehead resting in the crook of my neck, her breathing ragged and loud in my ear. She felt heavy, a dead weight of pure, spent satisfaction. We drove in silence for a full minute after that. The only sounds were the steady hum of the engine, the hiss of the AC fighting a losing battle against the human furnace we'd created, and our own breathing, slowly, gradually, returning to something resembling normal. The fog on the windows began to recede, the outside world slowly coming back into focus, sharp and clear and somehow different than it was before. My jeans felt uncomfortably tight. She stirred, lifting her head slowly from my shoulder. Her hair was a glorious mess, strands stuck to her damp forehead and cheeks. Her face was flushed a deep, rosy pink, and her lipstick was smeared. She looked absolutely, completely wrecked, and more beautiful than anything I'd ever seen. "Wow," she breathed, looking at me with wide, dazed, blown-out eyes. I think I've got it now." I just nodded. My throat was too tight to form words. I felt like I'd just run a marathon while wrestling a bear. Slowly, almost reluctantly, she began to untangle herself from me. She swung her legs back over the console, her movements languid and tired now, and plopped back down into the passenger seat. The first thing she did was pull her skirt down over her thighs, a gesture of modesty that was about an hour too late. She fumbled with the seatbelt for a moment, her hands a little shaky, before it finally clicked into place. The empty space on my lap felt impossibly cold. The loss of her weight was jarring, like a crucial part of the truck had just fallen off. The cab felt huge and empty again. Just then, I saw the sign, green and white, stark against the blue sky. Cedar Creek, 2 miles. I took the next exit, the turn signal clicking loudly in the sudden, deafening silence. I drove toward the first sign of civilization, a brightly lit gas station with a 2-bay garage attached. It looked like an oasis. I pulled Big Bertha to a stop near the mechanics bay, the air brakes hissing one last time, a final sigh of relief. The silence was absolute. The engine idled, a low rumble beneath us, but the world felt still. "Well," I said, my voice still hoarse and unfamiliar. "Here we are." She turned to me, a shy, tentative smile on her face. It was a different girl than the confident captain or the wild thing from a few minutes ago. This was Brittany, the girl who was maybe a little bit shocked at what she'd just done. "Thank you, Sam, for everything, the ride, the help." "No problem, kid," I said, trying to inject some of my usual gruffness back into my voice, trying to pretend my heart wasn't still trying to beat its way out of my chest. "Go win your championship." She reached for the door handle, then paused. She leaned across the console, over the gear shift that had been witness to so much. She cupped my rough, whiskered cheek with her small, soft hand, and she pressed her lips to mine. It wasn't a shy kiss. It was firm, confident, and tasted of cherry lip gloss, salt, and pure victory. It was a captain's kiss, a champion's kiss. It started soft, Then her mouth opened just a little, a hint of tongue, a promise of more. It lasted for 3 perfect world-stopping seconds, and then she pulled back, her blue eyes searching mine. "For the practice," she whispered, and the mischievous glint was back in her eyes. And with that, she was gone. She hopped out of the cab, nimble as a cat, snagged her pom-poms from the dash, and ran toward the lights of the garage, a woman on a mission once more. I sat there for a long time, just staring at the empty passenger seat. The air was still thick with her scent. I could still feel the warmth of her body, the ghost of her weight on my lap. I touched my own lips. They tingled. They tasted of her. Finally, I shook my head, a slow, disbelieving laugh rumbling up from deep in my chest. I reached for the gear shift to put the truck in drive. My hand brushed against something soft and fluffy and utterly alien. She'd left one behind. Hanging right there, looped over the end of my gear stick, was a single, giant, ridiculously fluffy pink pom-pom. I just stared at it. This absurd, vibrant, unapologetically girly thing right in the heart of my gritty, masculine world. It swung gently, a silent, pink explosion in the dim light of the cab. It was the most ridiculous, most wonderful thing I had ever seen. A trophy, a souvenir from the weirdest, hottest, most dangerous 50 miles of my life. A real, deep belly laugh erupted out of me then, a genuine windows-rattling laugh that shook the whole cab. I felt a grin spread across my face, a real one, the kind that makes your cheeks ache. I slammed Big Bertha into gear, the pink pom-pom swinging wildly back and forth like a pendulum, counting down to the best part of your life. I cranked the radio until the speakers screamed. It was AC/DC. Of course it was. You Shook Me All Night Long seemed appropriate. I laid on the air horn, a long, loud, triumphant blast that echoed through the sleepy little town, a declaration of something. As I pulled back onto the highway, the setting sun was painting the whole sky in shades of pink and orange, the color of a wildcat's pom-pom. I glanced at it, dancing on the gear shift with every vibration of the road. My back didn't hurt anymore. The ache was gone. I didn't feel old. I felt like I could drive all night. I felt like a goddamn champion.